You are now listening to the Hot Take Podcast, brought to you by Full Time Fantasy. Here are your hosts, Stephen Taroni and Josh Daly. Time to make it hot.
Welcome in. This is the Hot Take Podcast. Excited to be back with you guys for another episode of the Hot Take. And excitement's in the air. You know, football is back. We're learning news every day here, and we're going to share a lot of that news with you today. We have a special guest on the show, and we're going to go into some ADP sandwich, talk some ADP check-in, see where the pulse is. We like to do that from time to time here on the Hot Take. Josh, how are you feeling today, man?
Feeling pretty good, brother. Excited. You know, we got kind of a new look, which we'll talk about at the end of the show, and kind of revamped, and excited to see that we're making progress towards football. Some of the MLB happenings have been a little discouraging, but we'll see how kind of this plays out in the NBA bubble, and just hoping that the NFL can take advantage of being the last sport, so to speak, to get going, and they can kind of learn from everyone else's mistakes. But I'm getting more excited as we draw closer to the season starting here.
Yeah, it's tough right now because, you know, the MLB is kind of leading by example of what not to do. And then you have the NBA and the NHL kind of on the opposite spectrum there. I think I saw a report today that about 400 players, staff were tested today, zero positive results for the NBA. But they have an advantage, right? They have the bubble city of Orlando. So they really figured it out right away.
Yeah, no doubt. And of course, the WNBA and the Wubble, so you got hockey kind of doing the same thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But, you know, like you mentioned, got a couple guys that opted out already, Devin Funchess and Marquise Goodwin. You know, can't blame Marquise Goodwin. Him and his wife had lost a newborn infant, not too long ago. So, I mean, if I'm him, you can't blame the guy. I mean, that's completely reasonable. Devin Funchess, of course, his was retweeted by Adam Schefter, his statement. And it really kind of makes those Alan Lazard shares tick up a little bit, though, from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, that's right. Funchess and Goodwin, I think, are, the most fantasy relevant so far, I guess you could say, which is, I guess, good, right, from a fantasy football perspective. But
nobody's ever starting Brandon Bolden when he puts in those two random touchdowns during the season in the same game and frustrates everyone. Yeah,
I wonder what the percentage is for people that have started Brandon Bolden on Brandon Bolden weeks.
Right, like I'm sure there's like a 20-team, like master flex, flex spot team dynasty or something out there where the benches are literally just completely filled with anybody that's fantasy relevant. So it'd be interesting to see that play out. But yeah, it's a ton of Patriots, man. What was it, like 6 in total opted out yesterday?
Yeah, including Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower's the big one there. Bolden, like you mentioned, Marcus Cannon, and a couple others that I don't have written down here. But just to set the stage, players are going to be opting out as of right now. The deadline is August 4th. My understanding, and Josh, maybe you heard the same thing, is that every day that the NFLPA agreement isn't signed, they're just going to add a day for this. So it's going to be basically whenever the thing is signed. And as of right now, which is Wednesday during the day here, it has not been signed.
Yeah, and that's the way that basically I'm interpreting it as well. And one of the things that could be a sticking point or, a natural holdup to this is I feel like a lot of people think August 4th is just too early to make a call. And originally this happened in Major League Baseball as well. It had a hard deadline that was supposed to be firm. And yet we saw players opt out 2-3 weeks after that. And nothing came of it. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have something set up where this either gets pushed back to the later part of August or at least the mid part of August, where they're going to add another week or two onto this. So by stalling it out, I think that naturally gives players, buys them some time, which I think is a good move for the NFLPA to protect all the players. That is the main concern with some of the other items that were in there. The protocols looked good. There was just some player concern for safety, like we talked about on last week's episode. But yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be later on for sure. Like I'd be very, very surprised if it ends up being early August like it is now.
Right. Yeah. And, like most things that we've seen in this pandemic, things that are very important dates that have happened, not just talking about football, but just in general, dates have been extended. It's a very imperfect system right now that is doing its best to be perfect and to be safe. So, I think they're doing the right things right now, which is a good sign. It's like I said, it's going to be tough to match what the NBA is doing. It seems like there will be more cases, in my opinion, in the NFL during season than potentially basketball. And really the only bad thing so far are, positive results and for COVID for NBA have been people that have left the bubble and come back.
Right. Hopefully we don't get Lou Williams situation in the NFL. But unfortunately, with the rosters being like 5 times the size, it's probably very likely, especially coaching staffs being about 5 times the size as well. It's going to be tricky, brother.
Yep. But let's talk about the Patriots real quick. And then we will bring in our guest who, if I didn't mention at the top, we're going to say it here, Paul Charchian of Fanball and newly of GuillotineLeagues.com. So he's going to be talking about Guillotine Leagues and his new project. Super excited about that. Josh, I don't know anything about Guillotine League, so I'm super excited to talk about that.
Yeah, I've I have heard of them. It's just something that I like to kind of, when I join a league, it's something where I try to do it with as many people or that I know or colleagues. It's hard for me to just jump into a league with a bunch of randos. But with that being said, I know that they are offered over at MFL as well. So it's been one of those things that I've been kind of interested in. Just haven't pulled the trigger yet, man. I haven't jumped in.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Chark can convince us to get into one of these leagues. I think it's going to be pretty cutthroat. I think this is the challenge that we've been wanting here in fantasy football.
It sounds treacherous.
Yeah. Man, well, I've talked about treacherous every time I try typing guillotine. Oh man, that's a mess of a word to me. Like, why is there an I in there? What is going on? But I
think it's French. I don't know. Moving on.
Oh, it's got to be. So let's talk about the Patriots real quick and what they're trying to do. I mean, there's a lot of speculation right now that Bill Belichick is kind of, I don't know if you saw actually, because we saw the tweets from Schefter and Ian Rappaport. One of the tweets Schefter tweeted out was saying, an NFL exec was kind of not buying it, sort of thing, like calling out Bill Belichick's, like saying, I don't know, there's something going on here. And then we saw, what is his name? The guy who does impressions, Frank Caliendo.
Frank Caliendo, yeah.
Did you see that video that he put out?
No, I didn't. I'm gonna have to check that out.
He put out a video impersonating Bill Belichick, just basically telling guys to stay home.
It sounds amazing. I'm gonna have to look it up now.
Oh man, like yeah. You gotta do what's good for you. You gotta do what's safe. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Something. So, the speculation, of course, comes from this $22 million that the Patriots have saved, for this season. What does that mean to you, Josh? I mean, do you think that they're going to try using that on a key free agent at this point in this late into the offseason?
Well, I mean, feels like every episode we're talking about the Patriots. Last week we talked about the Patriots backfield, and we kind of talked about how Sony Michel just has like this, these bulky knees, and that's a major concern. The fact that Damian Harris wasn't even used, I mean, sparingly is being nice when you're talking about his usage in 2019. So there's really a lot of question marks now that Brandon Bolden, the touchdown vulture, is opting out of the season. It's just kind of interesting, man. I mean, you have Rex Burkhead, who we know is going to be there because he restructured his deal, and that freed up enough to sign Cam, which is kind of ridiculous to say. But $22 million, I mean, that's I feel like this clears the way for some of those incentives from the Cam Newton deal to kind of play out, et cetera.
Yep, that's right.
But also, they could be bringing in some running back help. I know you're kind of thinking about one guy in particular, but the guy I'm thinking that they may be bringing on board is a guy they already tried once this time last year. Was Antonio Brown. He shows up, plays a game, scores a touchdown, and then we don't hear from him again. But it's tough. That's a wild card, man. We know that some of these players are getting new agents. So it's interesting to see. Drew Rosenhaus, of course, does not represent Antonio Brown anymore, but he does represent someone that you might be thinking could be coming to New England.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm thinking about Devontae Freeman just because, and I didn't even think about this until we were talking, but Brandon Bolden not showing up definitely does clear up a spot for a running back, in that running back room that they usually carry for 5 running backs. So now they can get that 4th running back. Devontae Freeman still sitting there. And was it the Eagles or the Seahawks that he turned down that deal?
He turned down $4 million from Seattle.
So the Patriots could be in a position to comfortably give him 5 or 6 with this cap room here. And, maybe that's all he wanted was maybe just 5 or 6. Maybe that 4 was just too low, which, is really, really telling. I mean, from the Seahawks perspective, if you think about that. But I think the Patriots could be in play here to sign Devontae Freeman, who I don't think he's done with football. I mean, that would be very shocking if Freeman doesn't play in 2020. To me, that is very shocking when he just, 2 years ago, he was very productive as a running back.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Especially, in the Super Bowl season. I mean, I always call him the football robot. He has awesome vision and he's very versatile. He's good pass catcher. I mean, he's kind of a guy he would be a great guy to add to New England. And with Rex Burkhead's versatility, he can easily kind of take over the Brandon Bolden role on special teams. Of course, they do have, perennial Pro Bowler Jackie Slater there, or not Jackie Slater, but Matthew Slater.
Jackie Slater is something else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's always trying to stay relevant. But it's interesting because they do have a lot of pieces that they can kind of move around. I believe they added a couple fullbacks this offseason as well. So, I mean, that's kind of already replacing the special teams aspect of things. I just think once they were kind of scrambling around and using linebacker Elandon Roberts to play fullback last year, they kind of realized they needed to maybe add some depth there. But the way it plays out from a touches perspective, if there's no Sony Michel and you're basically relying on a dude that's playing special teams primarily and James White as your pass catching back, I mean, James White is not going to be a guy you give 18 carries a game to. And so Devontae Freeman, though, he can definitely come in and you might give a few more touches to Burkhead. You might give a few more to White, but you want to give 15, 16 carries, something like that to Freeman every game. I feel like we see this every year. People sleep on running backs because they're either quote unquote, too old, or they quote unquote can't stay healthy, until they can. And somebody gets, a really good running back that's productive on a really cheap deal. I don't think it's going to be really cheap, unfortunately, seeing that he scoffed at $4 million. But personally, if I was Devontae, I probably would have took it because you saw immediately they ended up signing Carlos Hyde. So it's kind of some Rashad Penny insurance. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Sony, just real quick, he could start off on the PUP list or at least maybe miss a couple games at this point. I mean, it's unclear if he's going to be able to report to camp. So until, it comes out that Sony is there, I think that the Patriots are really in play to make a move on a Freeman or a Lamar Miller. I mean, those are the only 2 running backs I can think of that are out there unless, they bring back a guy, something, like Theo Riddick or something like that, that I know is still trying to play football, but I think this move with Brandon Bolden, I'm just kind of looking at that like, they set up a spot for that running back position, in my opinion. So I think they're kind of preparing for the worst with Sony.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a worst case scenario. I think like the Patriots would just take a super patient approach like they did at the quarterback position. And I mean, good things come to those who wait, and they ended up landing Cam Newton. They could just basically wait until, the season starts and teams have to cut guys, and maybe the Chiefs cut DeAndre Washington, or the Raiders cut Devontae Booker, and they end up signing somebody super cheap like that. So you never know. It's like I said, we'll see. There's so much that's going to play out here in the next 4 to 5 weeks. It's going to kind of be like that first couple of days leading up to baseball season. The news was so hardcore and heavy. It's going to play out the same way in the NFL.
I'll tell you, a Patriots team of Cam Newton, Devontae Freeman, Antonio Brown, that would actually be, they would be talking Super Bowl again in New England.
It's like 20. That's like the 2015, 2016, like all pro team right there.
Oh yeah. That's QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1, all across the board, man.
Yeah, I understand. Right. Well, you know what I always say. No, not that. You got to look out for yourself first. Right. Correct. There is no I in team. But there is an I in COVID. And then virus. Very good. Okay, well, I can't influence you either way.
Oh, man.
Do what you think you need to do. Okay. Goodbye.
Frank Caliendo as Bill Belichick might be the best thing ever.
Yeah, that's fantastic, with especially with the Trevor Lawrence posters in the background.
Oh yeah, Frank Caliendo basically doing Bill Belichick, telling a player just maybe sit this one out. But let's bring in our guest, Paul Charchian of fanball.com and newly of guillotineleagues.com. Paul, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Still a co-owner in fanball.com, but I've turned my attention fully to guillotineleagues.com, getting that off the ground and getting started and embracing the most panic-inducing, anxiety-inducing, heart-wrenching fantasy format that's ever been invented.
So, yeah, because like me and Josh were talking just a few minutes ago, like we don't really know about guillotine leagues. The only thing I know about guillotine leagues is stuff that you have told me, which is pretty much just what you just said. And I'm just thinking, like, when you're talking about like all of that anxiety, it feels like it would be like watching Uncut Gems.
Yeah, it sounds potentially dangerous. Yeah, it definitely sounds dangerous for sure.
It's you got to know what you're getting into, right? Because every week, in a typical league, if you lose, you just take an L. And you're like, all right, I'll go next week. I'll go win. I'll go win next week. You take the ultimate L in this one when you finish last in a guillotine league in any given week. You get chopped and you're done. Your season's over. So for listeners who don't know, it's the way it works is you start with 17 teams at the beginning of the year. Every week, the low-scoring team for that week gets cut, and they're done, and all their players go to the waiver wire. So then everybody else gets a full run at an entire draft of players. And so you've got 1,000 fictional dollars to spend over the course of the season. And in week one, Ezekiel Elliott has a bad game, and suddenly it's a feeding frenzy to try to get Ezekiel Elliott. And, and maybe the second round pick was, like Julio Jones, and the third round pick was Patrick Mahomes. And, all these guys hit the waiver wire, and it's total pandemonium, and you're just trying to survive, figure out when to spend your free agent budget, and make it to the very end, never finishing last.
So Charge at guillotineleagues.com, I imagine people can play guillotine fantasy football.
Yeah, so it works for two kinds of players. If you know 16 other people and you just want us to run your league because it works specifically the way a guillotine league wants to work, we can do that. Or, like most of us, if you don't know 16 other people that want to try a guillotine league, you just figure out what price point you want to play at and what pricing level you want to be at, and you just go join a league. And we're always finding people that are ready to play and want to play and go draft and go have a guillotine league experience. And part of what's great is you might be listening right now going, well, I don't know anything about guillotine leagues. I don't want to put any money into it or whatever. But nobody knows anything about guillotine leagues. We're all on the same footing right now, right? Yeah. This thing was only invented a couple of years ago, so. There's no playbook on how to win a guillotine league. I have advice that I give that I think is right, and I was able to win one of mine last year. But it's not. It's you're at the same disadvantage of everybody else. So which kind of makes it an advantage, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, if you're the lowest score, you're out. I mean, that's it, and then
Yeah.
everyone's up for grabs, and, you just have to be smart with that $1,000 budget. Now, with different leagues, I play in leagues that use Fab, you can adjust the Fab. Can you do that at guillotineleagues.com with those leagues? Do you adjust the Fab?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by adjust the Fab entirely. I mean, you've got the $1,000 to spend throughout
Can
the
you
year.
increase it? Can you say, okay, you know what? We're going to start off with 1,500 instead of 1,000.
No, we just do. Everybody gets 1,000. That's it.
Okay.
And so spend it wisely. At 1,000, you can get so micro with that 1,000 where you spend. You're making bids for $248.
Right.
So I think
Right.
I think that kind of covers. That pretty much covers the needs for everybody, and everybody's in the same spot with 1,000 to spend. Now, part of the strategy is this just hypothetically again, Ezekiel Elliott springs free in week 1, and you've got a bit of a problem at running back. So do you put in 800 of your 1,000 to go get Ezekiel Elliott in week 1, knowing you could potentially start him the rest of the year, or you wait a week, find out who hits the waiver wire next, and see if you can just limp along. I mean, so that's part of the beauty of it is you might go to your grave. If you don't spend it, you might go to your grave with $980 in your Fab. And what good did that do you?
Right.
But the other side of it is you blow it all too early, and there's better and better players getting dropped. And by the middle of the year, you can't make enough good transactions. That hurts you too. So it's fast. That's part of the fascination of it, is just how.
What a
how
metaphor for real life,
Right.
I mean, do you want to spend all your money, or do you want to have all this money, and then what are you going to do with the money when you're gone? That's
Exactly.
That's deep.
Exactly.
That's deep right there in guillotine leagues. I like that. I don't know, Charch. I know that you like video games. I see you tweeting about video games a lot. This reminds me of like a hardcore, like when I used to play Diablo 2.
Yeah, that's a great game.
Yeah. Oh, an RPG. You play a hardcore. You create a character. That character dies once, you're done. You can be level 50, you've grind it, you can be, and then you're done. All the items, it's all gone. So that's just like this.
It is, and that's the panic-inducing part, right? So, knowing, it's week 8, you've survived to the halfway point of the season, and now Monday night, you're one of 3 people that could be chopped because you're near the bottom of the scoring, and you need, going into Monday night, you need 4 catches for 40 yards from your tight end, or you're going to be chopped from the league and it's over. You think you're not watching that game, just chiseling down your fingernails? The anxiety, it's amazing. And even when you're not in danger, you're watching to see what team is in danger so you can find out what roster is going to be hitting the waiver wire. Yeah. So it's the Guillotine League format it's just so much fun. I've never seen a response. I've been doing this for over 25 years in the industry. I've never seen anything like the response we've had to Guillotine Leagues.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome part that it's embracing the variance, whereas the variance is like another opponent. You're not just playing against every other team week in and week out, but you're also playing against being the worst, having the worst luck, and being on the bad side of variance. And you can even have those scenarios where you do have a 7-0 or an 8-0 team going into week 8 or 9, and you catch one really bad week and it's over.
That's exactly right, Josh. You've cracked the code on this. This is the whole point of the roster construction. The Guillotine League is to not have guys that 3 guys that all have dud games in the same week. And what you did last week doesn't even make any difference. There isn't even a record. You don't roll into week 8 7-0. There's no record. You're just alive or you're not alive. And a lot of the roster construction, the smart parts of the roster construction, are finding guys who don't flop. I mean, the best example by probably a mile is Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas was, amazingly consistent, always has been. And so you're trying to find guys like him that can perform. We all want Michael Thomas, I know, but there are others. Another example. Oh, here's another good example. Odell Beckham versus Jarvis Landry, same team. Jarvis Landry, most weeks, you're going to get your, 5 catches for 60 yards, and he just doesn't have that high variance of high upside, high downside, like a Mecole Hardman might have, for example. Whereas Odell Beckham, all over the place. Odell Beckham had, the big explosive games, only a couple last year. And then he'd have just these invisible games. And those invisible games, you get 2, 3, 4 guys on your team that put up those bad games. And that's it. Your season's over. So avoiding those guys, critical.
Well, me and Paul are best friends now. Come on this show and talk highly about Jarvis Landry.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. That's literally, I was waiting for it. Josh beat me to it there.
That's my guy.
Hey, look, if you're going to afford Jarvis Landry, just join Guillotine Leagues, Josh. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like you also maybe want to pick up a copy of our buddy Bob Lung's consistency guide, because it sounds like that could help you out and maybe take you a ways in these kind of leagues as well.
And Bob's super sharp. I'm a big fan of Bob. So I have not seen this year's consistency guide, but man, would that be perfect for this format?
Yeah, he's usually putting it out about this time, Steve. Isn't that right? Yeah. But he got it really early this year because of the pandemic. He's like, here you guys go. It's here's something to do.
Yeah, that's out there. That's out there. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think if you wanted to take that and use that towards maybe a strategy in Guillotine Leagues, might be viable for you. I think, in any fantasy format, you still need upside, but still, like, getting those consistent guys could certainly help. But I think Charch, you convinced me and Josh. I think we're going to check out Guillotine Leagues. I think it's going to be a good time for us.
I hope you do. And let me know if you need any help with anything. I'll do whatever I can to help you guys out.
Sounds good to us. Yeah, we're definitely going to look into that. But let's move on to some ADP check-in. We did this a couple weeks ago, and I think we're going to do it every so often here. We're going to do an ADP sandwich, basically this guy or that guy. But as I was typing sandwich on the show sheet this week, guys, I just got really hungry, and I just really started thinking about sandwiches, and it just got me thinking about, like, what makes the perfect sandwich. And I just wanted to, Charch, you're our special guest here. I need to know your favorite nuance of a sandwich. Like, what is it that gets you going for a sandwich?
It's the bread.
Okay.
I mean, it's same thing with burgers. To me, the whole, a great burger is built on the bun first. And Frank, a burger is a sandwich, right? It's just hot meat instead of cold meat. That's all. So I'm going to roll with this. I just had an amazing burger with a pretzel bun, and the pretzel bun has got sort of that harder outer shell on it.
Oh yeah.
And that keeps all the juices in. Whereas a lot of burgers, if they're really juicy burgers, it just soaks right through, especially that bottom bun.
Yep.
And you got a wet, drippy mess. The pretzel bun on a burger. Oh, it's so perfect when it's done right.
Oh man, I'm having burgers tonight myself. I don't think we have pretzel buns, but I'm getting very, very excited for burgers tonight.
You're about to make a trip to the grocery store is what it sounds like.
Yeah, maybe. You bring up a good point with the bread, Charge. I mean, like, even someone like Jack in the Box when I was on the West Coast and I would hit, Jack in the Box is not a great burger traditionally. So you're not getting the A+ grade A meat there, but they got the sourdough bun there, and that gets me going for a sourdough bun. I will certainly dive into that. Josh, I gotta know, what's your favorite nuance of a sandwich?
I like where Paul's going, but for me, man, it's the cheese that gets used in the sandwich because it's so instrumental. Like the best example that I can give is, like, I hate Swiss cheese, like, by itself, or like, I don't know anybody that just like, oh yeah, like they cut off like a hunk of, Swiss cheese and eat it. Like, you can do that with like cheddar or some smoked Gouda, something like that,
Right.
But like, nobody eats Swiss cheese because it tastes like butt. So it's like, but if you throw it on like, a chicken and bacon sandwich, or, if you're using, like a nice, like I mentioned, Gouda, that's like my favorite. Or like a nice spice of like a pepper jack slice can really kind of kick the spice up a notch if it's maybe a little boring. But you also, have some go-to favorites there. And it's just such a, like Swiss, for example, such a good complementary part to that sandwich. So it can kind of make or break it, man. You don't want to throw on like, you don't want to make like a nice turkey avocado bacon sandwich and then throw a shitty piece of American cheese on there. Like, nobody wants that.
Well, what cheese do you like, man? You sound like a cheese snob.
No, I pretty much only I don't really eat the Kraft singles anymore, but I'll pretty much mess with any other kind of cheese. Like we love cheese,
People give the Kraft singles a hard time. I'm okay with them, and done the right way. You put it on a burger, it's pretty tasty.
Oh yeah, burgers and grilled cheese for sure. They're still very valid for burgers and grilled cheese
because of the melting. I mean, that's the what you're really getting at when it comes to the cheese and the singles is if you need to melt it, it melts great.
Yeah,
and that is where the singles really shine. For other cheese purposes, you can do a lot better than the singles, but for melting, you really can't. It's really all about the singles.
Yeah, I'm just telling people to be careful. Just be careful and don't ruin your sandwich with a questionable cheese choice.
That's good advice, Josh. That's really good advice. I mean, for Swiss, you said it's very complimentary. It kind of reminds me of like the Jarvis Landry of cheeses. It kind of like it's the bill for every sandwich. No,
everything comes back to Jarvis Landry on this show.
At the end of the day, it's all Jarvis Landry.
I feel like it's kind of like the Tyler Lockett of cheeses because it's like, well, it's really not super attractive out there, but man, it's so consistent and it's very efficient when it gets used the right way. So
that's right. For me, it's definitely the condiments. So if there's a good honey mustard around, or maybe a good aioli, like a spicy mayo, that oh yeah. But usually when I'm at a restaurant and I'm looking at the sandwiches, that's probably the deciding factor. Is like what sauce are they using, or can I get a side of that maybe? But very underrated sandwich condiment combo, just simple mayo and mustard. Love that. Just give me that on a turkey sandwich. I'm good to go.
All right. For a second there, you didn't mention a meat. I'm going, you're on about a mayo mustard sandwich. Okay.
Oh no. Yeah. Ooh, that'd be weird. That would be strange. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So let's talk actual ADP here. Let's get into the ADP sandwich. First on the board, and we're going to go. They're going to hover around the same ADP. So you're in the 4th round. Charch, who are you drafting? And what we'll say for this, we'll say half point PPR.
All right. We'll go right down the middle.
Yep, exactly. So it's Chris Carson or it's Le'Veon Bell.
Carson by a mile. I get a much more explosive offense that is going to score a touchdown a game more. I don't have to hook any part of my team up to Adam Gase, which is always a huge advantage, right? Carson has no real threat on that team. There is no viable threat to take significant carries away from him. And then there's this. I mean, I think Carson is among the most undervalued running backs in the whole draft. I have him as running back 11. I think ADP wise, he's clocking in closer to running back 16, 17, 18. Yep. Let me see where he's.
I got him as the Fantasy Pros ECR running back 16 right now.
16. There you go. And I just, what has he done wrong? You get a good, by the way, a good player in Chris Carson for sure. Who on a very, very run heavy team, traditionally always has been, traditionally has used a primary workhorse back. It's always been Chris Carson. Really, there hasn't been the fact that he didn't fumble his way out of that job last year tells you how much that coaching staff likes him. And I don't understand why people aren't more enamored with Chris Carson. You get a goal line back, you get a reasonable pass catching back, and you get a guy who's not a member of the Jets. And that's always worth something as well. I've got Le'Veon Bell way down at number 22 among running backs.
Yeah, I got Bell going as the running back 20 right now. So they're pretty close. I don't think I could have said it any better as far as the benefits and the reasons that I would take Carson over Bell. But Steve, I know you're a Bell guy, so I'm not going to waste too much time on this one. I'll let you make the case for Bell here.
Well, Josh, you picked Carson for the same reasons. Is there anything else that you would, say that Carson has the advantage over Bell in besides like the offense? And
the main thing is like Paul said. There's no Adam Gase, so it's the thing is just the usage is fantastic. The offense, and again, the fumbles don't matter there. A Charch nailed every single point that you could probably hit.
All right.
So I completely agree. I know that's kind of boring, but he's also, he's just as capable as a receiver as Le'Veon Bell. It's just that, last year we didn't get to see Bell in that role, and we know he can shine. I just don't trust the head coach to do what's right and give him the damn ball.
I disagree with the last part, but everything else you guys are saying is spot on. I'm going Le'Veon Bell for the receiving work that he's going to get. That's the big part there, is that I know that is going to be there because last year 78 targets, and it was just a bad year for the Jets. I'm not saying it can be great, because I don't think that that's in the range of outcomes. Great is just not for the Jets offense this year, but it could be better than last year. And so that's, if you're going to give Le'Veon Bell 245 carries and 66 receptions, I think that efficiency goes up. I'm even banking on he's actually going to get more work in the passing game because Robbie Anderson is gone. And I'm not saying that that's a big deal, but I think that that's a downgrade when you bring in Bashard Perryman. Not a big difference there. But, then you have a rookie in Denzel Mims and then Jamison Crowder who's going to get a lot of targets. So I think, the targets are going to funnel to Crowder and Le'Veon Bell. So he has the advantage there. So in a PPR league, I think it's even more obvious for me. But 0.5, I'm still going to go Bell. Just like I think he's a better running back too. And I understand the Seahawks system of being, the better system, obviously the run first, but they brought in Carlos Hyde too. And I'm not saying I'm not saying he's well, he could definitely get work. I think they brought him in to be used. When a team brings in Carlos Hyde, they're going to use him.
Well, I would contend this. If you watch Carlos Hyde play, I mean, just what do your eyes say about Carlos Hyde as a player? And for that matter, why is he on his fourth team in 4 years? I mean, if he's particularly good and, his 4.1 yards per carry average would suggest he's not. Why, what is it that Houston, that knew him intimately, didn't want to keep him? Jacksonville, that knew him intimately, and Cleveland. Sorry. 5 teams in 4 years. Cleveland and San Francisco. What do they all know and not be interested in Carlos Hyde for?
No, and look, Carson is going to get 250 carries in this offense, but as long as he's healthy. But Hyde is still going to be used, is what I'm saying. So I do actually think that the carries for Carson, if he plays, I'm not sure how many, I don't have it in front of me, how many he played last year, but he got 278 carries. So I imagine he played most of the season. I think that's going down a little bit this year. But both, look, I think that you guys make the argument perfectly. Chris Carson is the safer, and just it makes more sense when you talk about the offense that he's in. He's the lead back, no question. So I think that makes a lot of sense. You're taking more of a chance with Le'Veon Bell. Let's move on. Let's stay with the running back. David Johnson or Mark Ingram?
David Johnson or Mark Ingram? Oof. I've got them ranked next to each other, so I'm not going to necessarily make a strong case for either guy, but the David Johnson that we saw last year was embarrassing. He was unbelievably out of shape, had no power, no elusiveness, no speed, and we haven't seen him cobble together a good year in 3 seasons. So, there's plenty of reason for skepticism on Johnson, but as mentioned just moments ago, Carlos Hyde isn't good, and he was able to be fantasy productive for Houston because just sheer repetition and knowing that he's going to get the ball at the stripe. And I think that gives David Johnson just a slight edge here. But honestly, I think like I said, if I got them ranked next to each other, we're in coin flip territory. But I like the fact that Johnson should get the vast majority of the work. And also this intangible about Johnson, what a god awful trade was he a part of, right? And if you're Bill O'Brien, you want to justify that trade, right? You're taking heat from all sides on this horrible trade. What a better way to justify it than getting a big season out of David Johnson, giving him every chance to prove that that trade wasn't as one-sided as it seemed to be. So from an intangible standpoint, I like the David Johnson side of it as well.
You're echoing what me and Josh have said on this show a few different times in this offseason. And just for reference, David Johnson is being drafted as RB21 off the board, according to 44 ADP, and Mark Ingram, RB22. Both would be about late 4th round, early 5th round picks. So, Josh, which one would you take in this situation?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, same here. Fantasy Pros ECR running back 21 and 22 back to back. And, it is tough because, like Paul said, I also had these guys ranked right next to each other. The weird thing, though, is kind of seeing how your league plays out. Like, for example, I reached a little for David Johnson and grabbed him at the 3-4 turn with my 4-1 pick, but Mark Ingram was still there at the 5-6 turn. So I took Mark Ingram at the 5-12, so going as the RB17 and the RB23. So, I know these drafts for Scott Fishbowl were a little bit little bit weird with some of the
for
scoring.
sure. Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, though, like if you are looking for a guy that produces, points for first downs and whatnot, Mark Ingram is definitely going to be your guy. And of course, he played the same amount of games as Chris Carson. Of course, Carson missed week 17 due to injury. The Ravens just basically had their bye week locked up. So that's the only reason Mark Ingram didn't play in week 17. But I guess for me, the deciding factor, not only do I think that there's more motive and incentive for David Johnson to have a larger role, but he doesn't necessarily have the threats in the backfield behind him. Duke Johnson, I mean, we've been waiting forever. I still think he's a talented running back. It's just like, if he didn't get used last year and Carlos Hyde was used more, who we just talked about, I just got a feeling we're still going to be waiting forever. And DJ's shown, I mean, he's been a very capable receiving back. So if we're talking half PPR scoring, well, yeah, then I'm probably going to be more inclined to go after the dude that, has caught 80 passes in a season before. I do think Mark Ingram might get a little more goal line action. I mean, they love to use him, for 2-point conversions and down close when they get down there. But at the same time, they also like to use Gus Edwards. Who's to say they don't use Lamar Jackson? They didn't use him a whole lot, in the red zone goal line area last year, but that could be something they do a little more this year, which kind of maybe makes his value decrease a little bit. Not to mention they use some pretty significant draft capital on J.K. Dobbins, who's very fresh. So I guess the best answer is I love them both, especially at this price. Absolutely. But I'm going to lean a little bit more towards David Johnson just because of the receiving threat. And also the lack of a threat behind him on the depth chart.
Let me jump in and ask Steve this. What do you think? Because I'm a little bit intrigued by this. Let's assume that you take a running back in the first 2 rounds. So you've got, just pick a runner for the first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
So you've got that guy. Now it's round 5, and you pick up Mark Ingram. Then a round or 2 later, you take J.K. Dobbins as your flex starter, and you've locked up the guys that should get 85% of Baltimore's rushing usage outside of the quarterback. Do you believe that is a valid drafting strategy to go Ingram, Dobbins in and start both guys to have? So you've got most of the rushing attack of the best rushing offense in football.
Yep. I think that going into a draft, me personally, I wouldn't try to do that. But if I picked Mark Ingram and then I'm on the clock in like the 8th round, 9th round, and J.K. Dobbins is there, I think you would have to like monitor where he's going. But I haven't thought about that strategy. I think it is viable for sure because Josh and I have talked about it a lot at this point in the offseason. This is going to be the year of the handcuff. We can foresee that right now. We know there's going to be positive COVID tests at some point in the season. So do you get one of the best handcuffs in J.K. Dobbins? Maybe you do. Maybe you do that strategy because, taking a shot at David Johnson, there's a lot of risk. It's the same thing baked in with Chris Carson is that there's just that injury risk because we've seen them go down so much. Now, to your point, Josh, Chris Carson played, 16 games last year, right? Or no, he played 15 games. So pretty healthy last year. But I think we still view him as a health risk. I think he was coming off some sort of minor surgery or there's an injury lingering with Carson at the moment, but he is 100% healthy.
He's got a hip injury that he's dealing with. But everything's saying that it sounds like he's going to be good to go.
And to answer your question, Paul, I think that is a very viable strategy for sure because the problem with Mark Ingram right now that we can already see is that the touchdown regression. I believe that he's not going to be as efficient on the touchdowns. And if he's not, then he wasn't that great for fantasy aside from the touchdowns because he barely touched 1,000 yards and he only got a little over 200 carries. And I feel bad using Carlos Hyde as like the pivot point of like an example being the butt end of, maybe Carlos Hyde is the Swiss cheese, right? Like you remove him from a good sandwich and he just smells like butt. But like what? He got 245 carries. What does Bill O'Brien do? He gives the ball to the running back. A Deshaun Watson-led team. They have all these vertical threats now. David Johnson could be in a great situation. or you're going to get a very average RB2. Like that's it right there. With Mark Ingram, I think the variance might be a little bit more. So I think David Johnson is safer, and he also has maybe more of an upside.
I think I'm with you on that. Can I go old man and tell you guys just a quick story about handcuffs?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sure.
My original company that got started me in this business was a magazine called Fantasy Football Weekly, which I started out of my apartment in 1993, and we're I'm doing a draft guide in the summer, and I'm doing the page layout, and I come up with this term handcuffing, which at that time was not a thing. And none of my staff knows the term, and I'm just like, I'm going to handcuff these two guys together. And so I start laying out the page, and I had to do all the page layout back then, even though I'm not a designer. And so I put pictures of guys in handcuffs, right? So I got their headshots and all these handcuffs, and nobody knows what the term handcuff means. So then I show the page to a couple of my guys that are in the office, and they're like, dude, why do you have a bunch of black guys in handcuffs? Oh, what's going on? Like, no. That's not what we're going for here. It's called handcuffing, and it's this thing where you have these two guys, you get the guy in his back up, and blah, blah, blah. And so we started that term, and sure enough, that we started a bunch of other terms that are still in use. But that was one of them that we brought along, and then now you guys and your listeners know the whole backstory behind the invention of the word handcuff.
That's incredible. That's incredible stuff right there. Let's keep it moving along because I think we covered Ingram and Johnson here. So let's get into two young wide receiver studs. And like we've talked about before, are just all these young receivers just going to be great? Because fantasy Twitter would tell you that, yes, all of these receivers are going to be great. And two of them are Terry McLaurin and DJ Chark, late 5th round wide receivers. So Josh, this time let's start off with you. Which one are you taking?
Man, this is tough. Again, these guys are so close. They're kind of right there in that middle of like that 4th tier of receivers. And, currently got DJ Chark as the wide receiver 21 and McLaurin as the wide receiver 23 on Fantasy Pros consensus ECR here. But separated by just Keenan Allen here, which I think is a little unjust. I think maybe we should have Keenan Allen a little higher there. But he's still right in that range of there, and Cortland Sutton. And I think the thing with both of these guys kind of breaking out, of course, McLaurin in his rookie season, and then DJ Chark, having seen quite a bit of chemistry with Gardner Minshew, those two are the reason that my Scott Fishbowl team last year had any inkling of success. And to kind of see the difference between when Dwayne Haskins came in against Terry McLaurin, it was a little questionable at first. And then they did kind of get back into the rhythm there, come week 14 and later on. Whereas DJ Chark, they were pretty consistent the whole season. There were a few games down the stretch where he only had 5, 6, 7 targets. But for the most part, he was getting, 9 targets, 10 targets, and getting fed pretty consistently. So, 118 targets last year compared to McLaurin's 93 targets. They still got in the end zone quite a bit. McLaurin, of course, got in the box 7 times compared to Chark getting in the box 8 times. And Chark did put up a 1,000-yard season, so he does have that on his resume now. So with that being kind of like the deciding factor, there just seemed to be a little bit more QB wide receiver rapport with Gardner Minshew for me. So for me, I'm leaning DJ Chark. How about you guys?
Charch, go ahead.
Chark, many of the reasons you mentioned, and also let's not forget the Jaguars probably have the worst defense in the league. It was only 2 or 3 years ago they had arguably the best defense in the league. It's awful. They're going to be down by 17 at half most games. And Gardner Minshew is in just sheer volume, I think is it. And by the way, Gardner Minshew's better than Dwayne Haskins. So, there's that. There's that as well. I'll hook my wagon to the better quarterback, an older receiver who's and McLaurin. By the way, McLaurin's awesome. That dude's great. It's just this everything about the situation tilts everything to Chark for me. So, if McLaurin were in Jacksonville, I'd be talking about McLaurin as my guy because I think he's a fantastic player. But situationally, I'm going to go with Chark, who I think is sitting on a really nice season. It wasn't like just one good game last year. he was consistently performing, and they're gonna have to throw to him on a regular basis.
DJ Chark maybe has a little bit more independence of the matchup because Gardner Minshew is going to feed him, and he's going to pepper him with targets. He's more of the 50-50 ball kind of guy because he is the bigger receiver. McLaurin's super talented and able to, he is great vertical, able to jump up and get the ball at the top over cornerbacks. But I think that Chark is going to maybe have a little bit more touchdown upside as well. So, yeah, I'm leaning Chark. And I think that, like, the momentum of the fantasy kind of pulse right now is sending McLaurin up where Chark is he's not falling necessarily, but, you're able to get him in a good spot, I think. McLaurin is rising, still.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, as far as, the QB situation, it's obvious that Gardner Minshew, I agree with Paul that he's better, but he has the reins. They've given him the team. If they didn't trust him, they would have went out and spent $1 million on Cam Newton before the Patriots did. You know what I mean?
So there's going to be a new segment on the show for this season. So, Charch, you're going to be the first.
It's called Paul's Hot Take. I mean, I need to wrap up every show. I like that.
That'd be a
exclusive.
Good
it's a year exclusive.
Yeah, we'll talk off air. That's a good idea. I like where your head's at. But let's get into your hot take for 2020.
Zach Moss will outscore Devin Singletary in fantasy points.
Okay, I like it.
Devin Singletary had 2 carries inside the 5 last year. 2. They will not use him near the stripe. And here comes Zach Moss, gigantic. He's built for goal line use. He's going to get all. They ran Frank Gore a lot last year, despite the fact that they were getting nothing out of his undead corpse.
Right.
Now in comes the fresh legs of Zach Moss. And I think everybody just assumes, because Devin Singletary is a good back, they tend to assume that Singletary is going to be sort of the primary and the lead back. And he will get more touches than Moss for sure. But Moss is going to get touchdowns. Last year, Frank Gore had 11 carries inside the 5. Good backs will convert at roughly a 50% rate. He might turn those inside the 5 carries into 5 or 6 touchdowns. He could score another 5 touchdowns from the other 95 yards on the field. And Zach Moss could be easily sitting on a double-digit touchdown season, and nobody wants him. Zach Moss is going practically undrafted in leagues. It's baffling to me that people aren't seeing the opportunity that Moss brings to the table. Going off the board is running back 48. It's a huge whiff by the fantasy community and an opportunity for savvy owners to get a back that you can plug in any given week and potentially get touchdowns out of.
Yeah, we talked about this a little last week, Steve. Guys like Singletary are going ahead of Odell Beckham and just stud receivers in drafts. And it's if anything, we need to be aware of some of the guys that you could potentially have on your roster outside of Devin Singletary. And real quick, just to kind of go a little further to Paul's point here, this tweet's from Graham Barfield on the 28th of July. He's charted 57 running backs for yards created over the past 5 college seasons. And Zach Moss ranks the 3rd best in yards per route run, behind only Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara, 2 guys who have established themselves as receiving studs. And Devin Singletary, meanwhile, is ranked 57th, dead last his rookie season last year.
Wow.
He ranked 36 out of 39 running backs in yards per route run.
How about that? That's amazing. I hadn't heard that. Thank you for sharing that. And the other problem with Singletary, and I've been doing this a long time, when you are a back that has to score at from distance because you don't get the ball near the stripe, you've got this downside of a 3 touchdown season that is very real, even when you're a good back. And that's the downside that Singletary has that I don't think anybody's really caught up with quite yet. And he could be, there's a scenario here where he's Tariq Cohen this year. Right. And so just way, way, way too much danger on Devin Singletary, not touching him at his ADP of 53 overall. That's for sure.
It's funny, Tariq Cohen, because I was thinking that is exactly what happened to Tariq Cohen this year, is that he only scored 3 touchdowns. 2 years ago, he had 8 touchdowns. I think maybe even more than 8 touchdowns. But yeah, it can easily happen with Singletary.
Yeah, great point. And that's the downside that you really have to be worried about. And by the way, you're exactly right. It was 3 touchdowns last year, 8 the year before. So, he crushed fantasy owners last season because, again, the runners who have to score from distance don't get the cheap, easy touchdowns. Those are going to go to Zach Moss this year. Was that bold enough for you? Zach Moss is going to outscore Devin Singletary?
I like it a lot, man. I mean, Josh is, I think, higher on Zach Moss than I am. And we both were high on Devin Singletary at the beginning of this offseason. I would say before the draft, right? Right, Josh? We were pretty high on Devin Singletary. And now they've drafted Zach Moss in Buffalo, and it seems like Devin Singletary's ADP is just climbing still. So
yeah, it's weird.
And at this point, I think we've both kind of leveled off on Singletary. So, you mentioned, we did that mock draft the other day. Devin Singletary goes off the board, and at the 408, I can grab Odell Beckham. Well, the running backs that are drafted behind Devin Singletary, David Johnson, Mark Ingram. So Devin Singletary is being drafted ahead of these guys. Jonathan Taylor, even somebody like Kareem Hunt.
Oh, I love Kareem Hunt.
Right. Big upside I think we're seeing here. Raheem Mostert.
Cam Akers even. Yeah. Like if you're a believer in Cam Akers as well, I mean, it's another guy that you can have. But I feel like it's really telling. I mean, I'm not as high on Cam Akers as most, but
I'm not either.
I think I'd probably rather have Akers over Singletary. I had a chance to draft Akers in a dynasty league, and Paul mentioned earlier taking Ingram and J.K. Dobbins. Well, I had Ingram on that dynasty team, so that's the only reason I went Dobbins. But yeah, that's something that you just kind of got to put things into perspective, man. And I don't know, with looking at some of these things and where Devin Singletary would slot in, I mean, my God, I hope he wouldn't be like your RB1. Like he's at best maybe an RB2 for fantasy. So if you're doing zero running back, I mean, I would really caution people to maybe think twice about using Devin Singletary as the RB1.
Yeah, I think he can be good and better in maybe a PPR format at cost, but you have to be careful with Singletary. And then, look, Zach Moss, completely free in your draft. So that's definitely something to consider. I think we can see, I definitely believe that he's going to get a lot of goal line work for sure. So if you want, somebody who could be a touchdown guy at least, I think Moss, can definitely provide that kind of value on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, especially with the receiving chops. Some of this info from Graham Barfield's pretty interesting. So we'll see how that one ends up playing out. But yeah, interesting to see who's between now and then who's going to opt out. We just had another. We had Nate Solder opt out for the Giants, so he wasn't too great last year. It wasn't very good, but still you're losing one of your starting tackles after you just kind of solidified your offensive line.
That's big.
It's going to be interesting, man. So we'll see. I feel like that's going to impact Danny Dimes a little more than Saquon, but yeah, man, I'm sure it's not the last of the opt-outs.
No, I've ruefully started a document that's just titled COVID opt-outs. And so I can track everybody, and we shouldn't have to do that, but you kind of have to now. And it was already, a fairly wobbly offensive line, and it's a bit of a loss. Now, he didn't have the same level of productivity for the Giants that he ever had for the Patriots, though. So, maybe it won't be quite as bad as we think, but still, don't love it and would prefer that he hadn't chosen this, but. What can you do? You can't. You got to respect the guy, anybody's decision along those lines, right?
100%. Yeah, you have to.
Solder ranked 45th by Pro Football Focus at the tackle position last year.
Yeah, just a 64.8 grade. So not great, Bob.
No, not great at all. Maybe it's an upgrade for the Giants. That remains to be determined. But Paul, thanks for coming on the show, man. We really appreciate you coming on. Of course, you can find Paul on Twitter at Paul Charchian. And, you can go to guillotineleagues.com if you want to start up a guillotine league. I think me and Josh are on that. Because
good. Yeah.
I think if you're in a couple leagues like we are, hey, so what? If you lose, week 3, what you focus on your other leagues. What's the worst thing about that?
And if you don't lose, then trust me when I tell you this, your guillotine league will slowly, week by week, become the most important league you're in. And your roster just starts turning into this powerhouse over the course of the season, and you're surviving and surviving and surviving. It ends up being pretty crazy, and you'll have a great time with it.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, you can get somebody like, Christian McCaffrey, right? And then a team loses and you can get Saquon Barkley. I mean, this dream scenario of getting, you can't get those two guys in drafts.
No way.
You're not going to be able to trade for that.
Even in an auction, that's not very plausible, even in an auction, to get those two guys. You can do it, but, you put yourself in such a dire position after that. It's very
right. Yeah, I can only imagine what some of the lineup decisions look like there at the end. I know you said you won one last year. I mean, geez, you must have been like, I can't believe I'm benching like these 4 guys, but you have to when your roster gets that swole.
Yeah. Right.
That's right. But go to fanball.com, especially during the season. Of course, you can see all of Charch's rankings, perfect for DFS players, weekly rankings. And then some hot take news. You can go over and check out our hot and spicy logo, courtesy of Jake Anderson. So a little bit of rebranding. Josh, the new logo, how you liking it?
Oh, loving it, man. Shout out to Jake. You guys can find him on Twitter at NFL Draft Talker. And I couldn't be happier, man. I'm loving the new look, man. I feeling fresh, feeling pretty swaggy.
Yeah, go over to Apple Pod, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. Check out our new logo. And then while you're there, hey, leave us that 5-star review. Anything you have nice to say about the pod or not, hey, honesty is cool. Go ahead and give us that review. Charch, thanks for joining us, man. Any last words for our listeners before we get out of here?
No, but there's been a ton of fun. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Steve. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Yeah, on behalf of Paul Charchian and Josh Bailey, my name is Steven Troney. Thanks for listening. This has been the Hot Take Podcast.